The planet is being rapidly exhausted by the activities of modern man. Deserts are advancing, and water is becoming scarcer. The extent of the destruction is unprecedented, but the possibility exists to make the deserts green and restore the Earth to a healthier state. It is in fact possible to restore damaged ecosystems, even on a massive scale. This has been done before. In China, in the 90s, local people were successful in transforming an area the size of the Netherlands from a desert into a green oasis. It is all about understanding how ecosystems function. The unspoiled valleys around the Chinese Lis Plateau are in fact very lush and green, and are an indication of how things may overall once have looked. It is an abundance necessary to support any civilization. How is it possible that such a landscape was reduced to a desert? When the Chinese began to survey the desert area, they determined that centuries of agricultural exploitation had emptied the valleys and hills of vegetation. Relentless animal grazing provides no opportunity for trees and shrubs to grow. The rainfall no longer seeped into the earth, it would wash down the hillsides, taking the soil with it. Over millennia, this destroyed the region's fertility. In an area the size of the plateau, millions of tons of silt was swept down into the Yellow River. A river that gets its name from the color of the fine Lis soil. The mounting silt content clog up the river, its flow is impeded, and floods are commonplace. A local problem then becomes a national problem. The soil is swept up into the winds, causing Chinese cities to be engulfed in dust storms. The dust extending even beyond Chinese borders. However, it would seem the Chinese have solved the problem. In Jordan, a similar situation exists. The soils are exhausted, and anything green gets immediately eaten by the grazing cattle. This then has to stop. The animals have been doing this for thousands of years, and that's what has destroyed areas of Jordan. If this doesn't stop, the problem can't be resolved. In Jordan, grazing was excluded for the first 3 years, as a solution, and that worked out very well. Species of plants thought to be extinct, last recorded in the 1800s, emerged from the ground, on their own. This approach allowed the ground to breathe, to take a breath. There was no action taken by people, other than to prevent the grazing, and this was an indication as to the resolving of this depleted soil problem. Simply by building a fence around an area, to keep the cattle out, grass and plants will begin to return to the bordered-off area. Over time, perennial root systems develop and begin to spread out. You then have microbial communities, living and growing in this microclimate that's created. Then, direct sunlight will not be hitting, nor will UV radiation be irradiating and sterilizing this microbiological habitat. Everything then will change. Everything has shifted to there being more organic matter, more biomass, more biodiversity. It's all about the natural water system in the air, how the hydrological cycle was created, and how they were constantly renewed. When you see degraded areas, people are not considering this ecological function. The science about this is being ignored. People assume the most important thing is production, but for survival and sustainability, it's more vital that the entire planet is functional. If we understand how the natural evolutionary processes work, if we emulate those, and if we don't disturb those, the world can be transformed. Ethiopia suffers similar problems. Practically all vegetation has been destroyed, due to continued agriculture. Floods are constant here also, due to the runoff experienced during the rainy season. Without vegetation cover on the hillsides, when the rain comes, the water does not soak into the ground, it flows away in a flood. Then the rain is not available for agriculture for the rest of the year. This leads to drought and famine for Ethiopia. But just as in China, areas of Ethiopia have been transformed by planting indigenous trees and plants. Clear flowing streams have then emerged, where once there were muddy trickles. With the plants now covering the hills, as rain falls, it is absorbed into the ground, and results in the rivers returning. This transformation occurred in only 6 years, by restoring the degraded landscape. The same ideas were applied, as the Chinese did, setting aside areas for the natural vegetation to return. Small dams were built in the ravines, which are now fed by underground springs. And now rain that falls weeks ago, slowly seeps through the soil, replenishing the supply of water. In these places in Ethiopia, the land has become fertile again, the fruit trees growing again, and a larger number and diversity of species than ever before. Wild animals that had disappeared have returned, like the leopard. Restoring the mountains of Africa, that they are once again harboring vegetation, is the means to restoration. The same situations are found in Rwanda. Over-farming on the hillsides caused serious erosion and a decline in fertility. As the farmers moved into the protected wetlands and began draining the marshes, they not only damaged an important ecosystem, but impacted the power stations that relied on the constant flow of water. The solution was, for the farmers to leave the wetlands, and restore the degraded slopes above them, improving their croplands, and encouraging trees and shrubs to grow back, capturing the rain. The wetlands are now recovering, and great volumes of water are once again cascading down to power the hydrostations. This model then restores the function of the earth to restore fertility, and with the huge areas of degraded lands, there's plenty of opportunity. This could employ millions of people, and the work would ensure the survival of future generations. The marshlands in Rwanda are far more valuable as a natural system, providing water for energy, than as farmland. This principle is the same for the remaining hillsides and ravines. Trees and plants also provide another key function, photosynthesis, reducing the greenhouse effect by taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Whatever rainfall comes down needs to be absorbed into and retained in the system. If it's lost through runoff or excessive evaporation rates, then the system gradually degrades. The ultimate outcome is complete collapse. Within 3 years, when applying these models, you start to see dramatic results in the restoration of the land. As the process continues, the soil that nurtures the crops continues to accumulate organic material from plants and animals. This holds the moisture and contains carbon. The gathering organic matter makes then a living soil. The water is retained in the soil, and the nutrients recycled as each generation of life emerges. Living soils retain far more carbon than the foliage above the ground. This then would naturally take carbon from the atmosphere. The source, the ecosystems, must be recognized as being more important and valuable than that which it produces. If this isn't addressed, then the flawed systems that are degrading the world will continue to compound the problem. Money needs to be based on natural ecosystems, and not on production and consumption of goods and services, or everything will become a desert. Slash-and-burn agriculture is a practice also, to clear vegetation for short-term agricultural gain, but the long-term effects on the biomass, soil fertility, and hydrological function will be the forging of more desert regions. Biomass can be used to restore other areas. Huge amount of organic material can be transferred from the lush areas to the arid places, instead of the slash-and-burn practices. The eroded landscapes need to be transformed into the functional ecosystems they should be, then the foundation is created for sustainability and a future for the human race. If we continue the way we're going to reach a crisis point where world starvation will be an actuality.